It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life. From the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators. The famous and not so famous. The controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here is Douglas Coleman.
Welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show. It's me, Douglas Coleman. How are ya? Ed Roman is here today. Ed is an award-winning singer-songwriter, performer, and multi-instrumentalist from Ontario, Canada. I've known of Ed and his music for the last couple of years, but with scheduling and everybody's busy, this was the first chance that we had to have him on the show, and I'm very excited about it. The interview went very long and could have went a lot longer. Anybody who knows me and the show knows that I hate to delete and edit good content. So we kept about 99% of the interview intact, but it's a full show, so I don't have a lot of time to chit-chat. We will be right back with Ed Roman.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
Hi there, this is Stuart Epps from the UK, record producer, engineer. You might have heard of me. I've worked with artists from Elton John to Led Zeppelin to Bad Company, Twisted Sister, Robbie Williams, Oasis, many great bands and artists in the past and the present and hopefully in the future. But you can work with me as well. You know, all you got to do is get in touch with me on eppsmusicproductions.com. That's eppsproductionsmusic.com. And I can help you with your productions and with your recordings. A lot of people do home recordings now, which you can only take so far. Maybe they need a bit of professional help. So get in touch with me and we can sort it out. And thanks for Douglas Coleman for giving me the spot. Thanks a lot. Cheers, bye.
Hey, Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat. See? Nothing up my sleeve. Presto! Wrong hat.
Now here's something we hope you'll really like.
Okay, please welcome my guest, Ed Roman. Hi, Ed. How are you?
Douglas, I'm quite well. Thanks for having me on the show today. It's a pleasure.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. You know, I've been familiar with your name for probably the last 2 years. I've seen, you know, stuff posted by Michael Stover, and I think that we are on similar websites or a couple of the websites or something like that. But we've never actually talked, and you've never come on the show, so I'm glad you're here and I get a chance to share you with my audience and listen to some of your music. Before we talk about your album and stuff, give us a little background on yourself. I know you're from Canada. How long have you been in the music business, and just any of that good stuff you want to throw in?
Well, I guess you might say I've kind of been in the music business all my life. I mean, where I grew up was a very rural area, and north of the metropolitan area of Toronto. Not a lot of people around. We had a big family that all lived in a farmhouse. There was 8 of us, grandparents, parents,
Wow.
brothers and sisters. It got a little crowded sometimes, but there was a lot of love in the house, and music scene, it was everything. It was like there was a fight to who was going to listen to what radio station next, or with the one record player, which was like the classic, you know, Bach style record player. You took it off of its hinges and you put the speaker on the, you know, your pillow or something like that. That was like, well, who gets to use it next? And the 8-track player going in the basement all the time with tunes. I'm kind of dating myself here, but that's okay. But everybody, including like my dad and my grandmother, who was always singing tunes, and my dad was always making up tunes and loved comedy numbers. And my mom and dad were like from that jazz era, so they loved like a lot of Ellington and, you know, musical heroes like Buddy Rich and Mingus. And that for me, okay, was one part, seeing that enthusiasm in my parents and grandparents. But then my brothers and sisters, who are much older than I were listening to music from the late 60s and 70s. And I was very influenced by, the older brothers' record collection. What were my sisters listening to? So there was an envelope of a multitude of different kinds of genres and eras of music, but it was always happening. And even I remember coming home after Presley died or when Lennon was shot, and people in my family were crying in the kitchen watching the news report on the TV or listening to the radio about it. And I thought, man, like, this music thing has got something else connected to it other than, man, it's really cool what people are doing with their fingers and the songs that they've written. There's something on a spiritual level that has this sense of potency that's tied into philosophy, self-discipline, the physical aspect of it. There's so much of it that for me, I went, wait a minute, it's more than just, playing tunes. And that's what I really love about music, is that sort of, artisan or person that has pretty much spent their entire life practicing their craft, doing what they're doing, but doing it out of necessity, Douglas. I mean, one of the things I've started to realize more and more as I get older is that I write because I have to. I write a song because I'm experiencing something in some way. It's either jubilation, or it can be elation, or it can be you're in a downright funk. So all of that to me means that cathartic release. I have that vehicle. Music for me is that. It's other things for other people. If you have a vehicle, that's wonderful to be able to do that. But for me, that retrospective even ability to look back at what I've said, what I've gone through, then accelerates even more of the learning process in behind the life experience for me. So I guess it's, like I said, it's all encompassing to me,
Well, I think that's true with many artists, that it's not just something you want to do. It is something you have to do. It's just something that's in you, that no matter what else you do, you're always having that urge to create. And
right.
I've had the similar experience, and I've talked to many other musicians and actors and things who just, no matter what they were doing in their life, if they got a corporate job to pay the bills, there was always that, oh, I just got to get home and, I got to start writing. Or, the ones that were actors generally became waiters because they could sort of perform in front of the people that they were serving. It wasn't quite as good, but it served its purpose. And I see what you mean, that it's something that's in you. Do you think it's nurtured, though? Or do you think people have a born gift for music? Does anybody else in your family play music?
My sisters went through the piano lessons, but they didn't stick with it a couple of years. And my brother was always singing songs. And like I said, my family was always singing. We were singing in church or whatever it was. So, I mean, but no, nobody ever really pursued it to the level that I did, whether like I got my scholarship that in high school and I went off to college to study music. And for me, it was like, well, I need to know more about it, because I think what you're saying, in part of your question are people born with a gift? Is this like, I think it's a heightened sense of perception as to what you're looking for originally, or what you're trying to say. But as I've learned, and I'm still learning, and I hope to keep learning, is that the process starts to pull you through it. That you don't own the song kind of owns you with that initial spark. And that enthusiasm that you're talking about, whether it's the person at the corporate job that needs to rush home to work on the material or try it out in front of an audience in the evening before they go to work the next day, it's all part of that. What is being said here in this moment to me is part of this experience, because as I said, sometimes I've even gone in the process, and you yourself must know the same feeling. You think, well, this is the idea, and as you begin, it is what it is. But sometimes through that process, there are new things that show themselves that you go, well, of course this should be here. And I didn't think of saying that, because the previously conjured thought then illustrates something even more. And sometimes it never ends for people. They keep writing and writing, a stream of consciousness and these ideas that keep flowing. That's what I guess that excitement that you're talking about, and where that heightened sense of perception, I think it's beautiful to say somebody has a gift and an ability. I've seen things with autistic people that are blind, and their communicative skills in terms of like what we consider as standard are very different, but they can commit a Bach piece to memory after just hearing it once. So I would say that there's something definitely, cerebral in some way in the listening and perception mechanism of people when they start on that process, and they go, wow, I'm seeing something else. I'm seeing something else. And the most important part, Douglas, is that we take the journey.
Well, that's very true. There are those people that just have a natural ability to sing. People that can just sing, that have never had a singing lesson. And to be honest, I'm not a big fan of singing lessons because I don't think you can teach it. I think you can improve on someone's technique. You can improve on the way that they breathe, their enunciation, if you will. But you can't create a beautiful voice. That just doesn't happen. I think people are definitely born with that.
And I think you're right. And sometimes there are aspects to the timbre and the color and the quality of certain voices that lend themselves better or much more readily in a certain area of that kind of an art field. So let's take an example. Like, let's look at Alison Krauss. And I mean, to me, she's an angel. She sings like an angel. I love the stuff she does with Union Station, and everything that she does is like, I love it. But her voice is very different to somebody else who I love, which is Tom Waits, who has this kind of under the bridge, hey, come here, boy, I'm going to tell you a story. That gruff kind. Somehow inside of that character of that, it allows it. And I wouldn't say people would say Tom's an operatic singer or but he's a storyteller. And I guess that's where that intimate blend between what the voice does and how it utilizes it. And I agree with you. And so, I mean, I've taught for 25 years, guitar, bass, keyboards, drums, voice. The biggest thing I try to do in the teaching experience is try to get people to find their own voice, whether it's through their instrument or through the vox humana. It's hard to do that because our experiences are so personal. They're defined by what we see and perceive and go through every day. We're defined by our influences, but sometimes those influences develop limitations. So when a young vocalist or somebody comes to me and they say, well, what do you think of this? How do I sound? And I think, well, you're singing it right. I like your presentation and everything, but you're sounding like every other girl in the last 10 years that's been singing. And I can hear where that influence has made its way into your style, but yet you haven't yet found your voice. And I don't know what that is. Just like you said, you have to go out and listen and live it and learn, and whether it be other people's songs, study eras of music, because inside of that, there's this click. It's this mechanism. Even as a young musician, I remember imitating people like Jaco Pastorius and Hendrix and other people that I was just like, oh man, they're like my idols. And it was a painter friend of mine whose professor said to him, he said, you are painting like Van Gogh. You paint beautifully, but you're still not painting like you. He had all the skills and the abilities to be able to do these kinds of things, but to break that boundary, to realize, hey, it's okay to be me. It's okay to sound like this. This is where originality inside of that experience comes to its forte, right? So there's a lot of statement to your gravity. A gravity to your statement.
The point that you brought up was a very good point, that there are lots of bands out there that sound like someone else. Immediately when I listen to their music and say, oh, they sound just like or very similar to whoever. Finding your own voice is the tough part. And that can take years for people sometimes. People don't always get it when they're 18 or 19 years old. Sometimes they're well into their 40s before they find their own voice.
And I think that's okay. I think that, there's some people totally that are original from the get-go in terms of what they're doing. And, I like to think it's kind of like the child raised by wolves, Sometimes it's hard to find original thought, as I said, because we're so defined by so many things that influence us, things that turn us on, things that excite us and motivate us. But at the same time, we're also afraid in some ways to, sound like Ethel Merman just because we want to, or whatever it is. The fact that you're experimenting with it so that the diatonic scales or whatever it might be have been there for the longest time. But it's like, well, how do you choose to use this information, and how do you let it become an extension of your idea? And I think it's good. I think it's when a young musician gets into somebody and they start learning stuff, and so many things change. Their mechanical abilities, the depth of how they study a certain artist, and it's so healthy because it's pushing them in a really positive way. And it's always changing. I mean, you go through growth periods. Music and human experience grow at these different points. I can remember it's like, okay, when I was in grade school, it's like the Beatles and Rolling Stones. And then when I got to high school, it was more like Jaco Pastorius. And then when I was in college, it was like Mingus. And then when I got out of that, it was like, well, where can I find a job? What can I do with all this information? I played in country bands, African bands, funk bands, cover bands, jazz ensembles. And that sort of kitchen sink mentality to it all made me go, well, it's okay to cross-reference a country tune and a reggae number with a, one-drop feel. It's okay. It hasn't been maybe done. Maybe it has been done. But I'm going to present it this way because it feels right. And I'm not trying to contrive it together in this sort of like I'm gluing it with something. It's just, it found itself there through all of those experiences. So you go, well, here's the new ripple.
Well, let's listen to one of your songs. As I mentioned before we started the interview, Michael Stover was nice enough to send your entire album. So we've got 13 songs off of your new album. I love the title, too. Ed Roman, Red Omen. That's very clever.
Well, I'm a dyslexic, so it all kind of works out.
It worked,
in the end,
yeah.
Right?
Which one would you like to play first?
Well, why don't you go with that opening track? It's a colorful track with a lot of interesting sort of language and fantasy, let's say.
All right, and it's a good tongue twister for me as a challenge. So here is Ed Roman and the title track, Red Omen.
Hey, did I ever tell you that I grew up with Red Omen, and boy was he a neat kid. He had all sorts of really cool things to play with, like a plutonium spaceship lunchbox and a bathtub full of Lego. And I didn't believe you when somebody said that he fled with Jimi Hendrix to a UFO type base camp up on Machu Picchu. Up on Machu Picchu. I said, excuse me, it's not my fault. He's playing the crime so he can't get caught. I said, excuse me, I must confess. Well, give me 2 words. Well, in my defense, laughing mad. I'm laughing mad. Laughing mad. There's a red hot stove down in Pittsburgh going out hard like a cherry pie. Call me a fibber, call me a liar, say it to my face, like a cross between Benjamin Franklin and Ian Pace. And I didn't believe the man from MI6 living out in the sticks, who souped up his side by side like Evel Knievel, just like Evel Knievel. I said, excuse me, it's not my fault. He's playing the crime so he can't get caught. I said, excuse me, I must confess. Well, give me 2 words. Well, in my defense, laughing man, I'm laughing mad. I'm laughing mad. Laughing mad. Play it out. Well, that's about all that sums it up for me today. You see, my nerves are shattered, tired, tattered, beginning to fray. Just like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, realizing only now you're caught in someone else's claws. And I didn't believe in myself, if no one else, to be making voodoo music in some small town way up in Canada. Way up in Canada. I said, excuse me, it's not my fault. He's playing the crime so he can't get caught. I said, excuse me, I must confess. Well, give me 2 words. Well, in my defense, laughing mad. Well, I'm laughing mad. Well, I'm laughing mad. Laughing mad. Hey, did I ever tell you that I grew up with Red Omen? Boy, was he a neat kid.
Yeah, wow, that was great. You know, one thing, I've had a lot of musicians on this show, and the one thing that I always like, and it's kind of relevant to what we were talking about, is when I play the song, and when I get stuff from Michael, I never listen to it until the show because I want my reaction to be fresh. I know he always sends me good music, so I don't have to worry about it. But it doesn't immediately strike me as, oh, it sounds like them. You know, there's so many different, I don't know, genre, style, whatever. The only one that came to mind, and again, it's not like you sound like them, but it's just like you could almost put in the same genre or in the same big box or something like that. And it's odd that they're from Canada as well. It was Bare Naked Ladies.
Ed Robertson. That's it's funny. I've been compared to that before, and the band has before in the past, and I take it as a compliment. I mean,
well, they're great.
They're really interesting writers, and aside from the classics or the pop hits that they've written, the extent of the writing on the records is pretty deep, and they've done a lot of really interesting things. They were a powerhouse for the longest time, and they did a lot of interesting charity work. I actually met Ed through an event that used to happen in Unionville up here that we raised money for kids' homes that were up here, and I take it, like I said, when anybody compares it to anything, it's okay by me, because like I said, we all define our experiences by some relationship to something that we've fallen in love with or heard or have a familiarity, to. And I think I would even say the same thing. If I checked out a band, I would say, hey, that reminds me of Yusu Endure, or, that sounds like, Level 42, or, hey, that's Esperanza Spalding. Wow, that's like a Baroque kind of esque. We can't help but not do that. But that's a good thing, because I think it means that there's some connection, and it's healthy. When we were working in the studio, like Mike, Jack, and I, and we're working on something, we'll say, hey, the ghost of so-and-so was just here. Or we had a secret visit from, Tom Petty or somebody like that, because there's something familiar, not what we're doing, saying, or writing, but that it would be like this, well, maybe that's something they would do, that's something Billy Joel would do, or that's something and it's okay. I like I said, people say it's all been done before. I don't necessarily agree with that statement, because originality, as we were mentioning before, trying to find what that is, procures a new version of that idea, whether it's similar or it has a new energy to it. And that's what makes it new and exciting again.
Right. Well, it's the interpretation. There's a limited number of notes on the piano, but it's how you interpret it that makes it interesting.
Exactly.
And which brings me to my next topic, which is the current state of the music scene. And this is one rant that I go on a lot. Because I have kind of mixed feelings about it. Going back to my original statement about it's the interpretation that makes the originality and also gives the artist his soul. Okay. When you use too much computer-generated sound, it removes the soul from the music, and it leaves me absolutely flat, cold. I get no shiver up the spine. I get no ooh feeling when I listen to the song. Nothing. And unfortunately, personally for me, I think that much of the music that is the major label stuff that's out there is exactly that. I listen to it. It does absolutely nothing for me. Zero.
Well, that's the interesting thing. While I'm talking here, I'm writing food. Just so you know what I'm thinking, food. I'm writing internet, and I'm writing music, which you just mentioned. Okay, now inside of all that, your statement, and I mean, it can be argued. There's people like, well, let's look at the difference between Kraftwerk and Eric Clapton. Let's look at the difference between, Autobahn and something like Lynyrd Skynyrd or something, right? Or let's look at the difference between Bach and, somebody, a modern contemporary, Stravinsky. Okay, there's always that comparison factor and always be there. What's interesting about your statement on a sociological level is that for decades, centuries, years, we as people have developed with these frequencies, these vibrations, and these sounds through human beings becoming proficient, learning to play sometimes extremely difficult instruments, extremely complicated pieces, sometimes just funky, good old root, chakra, rock and roll, funk, whatever it is. All of that means its extension has always had a human touch, right? And it's the same thing with food and agriculture, even for that regard. We have developed as a species of people with food, and all of a sudden we come along with genetics and we start modifying things. And people, gastrointestinal problems, Crohn's, colitis disease, which are almost parallel to those kinds of things becoming involved in them, consumer species as far as how we buy and eat things. That's another huge change where we've removed and gone to a technical laboratory-esque like idea of what pharmacology is. And then the same thing with the internet. We who would get together on a porch and have robust conversations, sometimes crazy, sometimes beautiful, sparks would be hitting the porch floorboards, and all at the end of the night, someone would feel the sense of elation, somehow be turned on by the laughing and the character behind the storytelling. All of that was developmental from the time of early speech, when people were sitting around fires eating mushrooms and learning to actually develop, the way to elocute and speak and talk and develop language. And as a result of this, what you're saying has so much gravity because there's been this huge change, an immense change that's happened so quickly. And inside of that then exists formula, which is then hard for people who have been, trained and or they understand only this to break away from what that formula is. And usually, readily, it will be criticized. Like I'm applying for these grants right now. We're talking about the different kind of people that could be on the adjudication boards. Well, if a girl or a boy that's, maybe a 20-something that listens to electronica hears what I'm doing, they might not get it. And that's because there's a differential in, their learning experience and their musical experience, which has been highly, electronic, like I say, computerized, and all those things. And I wrote an article the other day for another, another magazine, and they were asking me a similar question. And I didn't want to sound like an old curmudgeon, because that's not what I'm not. But when I find something new in 21st century, it has to have, for me personally, because it's part of my DNA, exactly what you're talking about. A human, groups of humans, people in some way relaying that human engine experience through them towards the instrument out again. It becomes this huge. It's hard to describe if nobody's ever played an instrument before or really fallen in love with music on that level. So I don't, like I said, I don't want to sound like a curmudgeon, but I guess for me, that's why me being alive in the 21st century means it's okay for me to be eclectic and to dabble in that kind of instrumentation, because it's who I am, and I'm not going to be afraid of it.
I think that the technology is wonderful for certain aspects. Certainly to record, to mix, to master. Beautiful. To be able to see the wave patterns on the computer screen. That's great. Okay. It's a lot more work, obviously, to do it on tape. But when the computer is actually creating the sound that you're hearing, then it just leaves me cold, if there's too much of it. And I remember an interview with Joe Walsh, and he was on Howard Stern. And he said he was talking about going into the studio after not being in the studio for many years. And he went back in to make a new album. And he said, I can't believe how much has changed. He said, they start with the rhythm track now. He said, this is crazy. He says, I can't do that. I can't work like that. He said, I've got to sit down with the guitar or a piano and, on a piece of paper and write out my lyrics, and then I'll sing it. And then the guy playing the drums plays along to me. And, I can't get that. I can't do it either. When I write exactly the same way like that. And the idea of saying, okay, we're going to do something now. Switch on the rhythm box and doom chaka doom. Okay, everybody go. Nah, it just doesn't work for me. Absolutely.
Well,
not.
And I mean, there's so much that has happened and changed in the recording process, and it's grown with the industry, and the industry has grown with it, if you will. Let's say, just for argument's sake.
Yeah.
But what would happen in yesteryear, whether it was, let's say, people have seen the Muscle Shoals documentary lately, or the one that's out that's about Capitol Records and the Wrecking Crew, the different artists that had come through those studios for, let's say 35 years or 40 years. The process really was about, we wrote this song as a group. It feels right, which is sort of the Buddy Holly method of things. So let's capture it.
Yeah.
And that meant, usually facilitating, and as I said, the recording process years ago would be like one mic in a room. When Strange Fruit was recorded by Billie Holiday, it was probably like one or two mics. It was set up like a distance recording. You got the kit in the back, the piano player's closer. Whatever instrument is quieter is always getting closer to the microphone, and the vocalist is right up in front of it. So you've captured that depth recording, but it's like, well, how many times do we need to take this to get it? Or, we caught it in one take. There's also what I like and what you're talking about, the human experience of a slight variance in a beat. Mm-hmm. So if I listen to a Yusef Lateef album, the tempo might start here, but by the time the tune's finished, it's about here.
Right.
And that's because they've been getting into it. They've been pushing some of the juice. There are programs and algorithms out there so that it can create that artificial slip, let's say. So it can feel like it's actually playing behind the beat, or it's playing right on the beat like a machine would, or it's slightly ahead of the beat. So it's pushing the groove in a certain way. But I'd rather hear that come from a person, to tell you the truth.
Well, right. I got a kick out of when I first started using Pro Tools, where they actually had a function to add tape hiss.
Right.
And I just thought that was the stupidest thing in the world,
Well, and it's a tool. That's the thing. I mean, I know guys that are in their gear, and it's great. You could sit and talk to them all day. But at a certain point, I got a cutoff point. Because I'm more about like, well, what are you going to do with the gear? The gear is just a tool.
Right.
What do you have to say, and how are you going to say it? That's there to capture it. And what has changed is it has now become the standard for the mechanism behind the creation of a tune. So it removes, in some way, a group experience. It can, from or that discovery process. Man, if you saw the Wrecking Crew documentary, I mean, some of those tunes, they were just a basic idea. Yeah. The band fumbled through a bunch of things. Somebody caught a vibe and a groove. A bunch of other people caught on, and before you knew it, well, there's the tune. Here's the arrangement. Let's cut it. That, to me, is far more kinetic. And the way it grows as opposed to just being dialed in.
The masters have become the slaves.
Well, and the industry has changed, as I said, so much. Your question it's got an extension on. I mean, I saw the Jaco Pastorius documentary that Robert Trujillo had put together. And there was some wonderful interviews with people like Wayne Shorter and talking about what the industry was, that it was the musicians that were the industry, and it was more about your musicianship and how, you wrote and your abilities that it was, as opposed to just shaking a leg and looking sexy. I mean, that's the other thing. With the industry, commercial, mainstream industry stuff, I flip through some magazine or something, I see most of those people selling cosmetics and other things more than they're actually writing tunes or doing something musically. So, right. And I think to myself, well, it's just like a marketing scheme. So you find a pretty person, then they write and put out the clever little tune, and then here comes all the eccentricities that go along with it.
Right. Justin Bieber selling underwear.
Taylor Swift selling makeup.
Yeah.
Jews and
let's get to another one of your songs, Ed. Which one do you want to do now?
I don't know what if you got them. I'm so glad Michael sent you the whole album. And
I got the whole album. So
I don't know is there something that jumps out at you? Because I'll throw something right away.
No, because I haven't listened to it yet. That's the thing. I don't listen to the music when Michael sends it because I want my reaction to be fresh. I want it to be the first time I hear it when I'm with the guest, when I'm with the musician.
Well, to be on the marketing side of things, because the more recent single was "The Way She Goes," why don't we go into that? It's sort of a storytelling Canadiana Americana-esque kind of number.
The Way She Goes. Okay. Well, let's listen to this one. This is Ed Roman, The Way She Goes.
I could dance a lifetime with my sweet tobacco rose. You could build your nation with dirty hands in denim clothes. And even in our twilight, I think that everybody knows. An open mind, a subtle heart are the only way she goes, and that's the way she goes. Just like an open door or window, that's the way she goes. Just like the bathwater with the baby, that's the way she goes. Too many people acting crazy, that's the way she goes. Have you been singing this song lately? The whistle on your kettle's been chirping, and deep red is the song. Your mortal shackle's been winning battles, I think you've known this all along. The squeaky wheel's been seasoned because the grease price is too high. just change another channel, it never ever changes, and wave it all goodbye. That's the way she goes. Just like an open door or window, that's the way she goes. Just like the bathwater with the baby, that's the way she goes. Too many people acting crazy, that's the way she goes. If you've been singing this song lately, sha-la-la-la-la-la, we know it's wrong but we say it's right. Sha-la-la-la-la-la-la, we know it's black but we say it's white. Sha-la-la-la-la-la, you gotta put up a hell of a fight. Yes, you do. We're somewhere in the middle of the ending. So summarize your fears and woes. It's like a fragrant golden season. It purifies you and your soul. I tip my hat to rebels when the newsman calls him foe. And if you check inside your pockets, you'll find it's all just one big show. But that's the way she goes. Just like an open door or window, that's the way she goes. Just like the bathwater with the baby, that's the way she goes. Too many people been acting crazy, that's the way she goes. If you've been singing this song lately, that's the way she goes. If you've been singing this song lately, that's the way she goes. If you've been singing this song lately, that's the way she goes. If you've been singing this song lately, that's the way she goes. If you've been singing this song, that's the way she goes. That's the way she goes. If you've been singing this song, if you've been singing this song lately, that's the way she goes. That's the way she goes.
Ah, very nice. The one thing that's in that song that I particularly liked was the harmonies.
Oh, thank you. That would be going directed towards Michelle Rasky, an old singing partner of mine. I mean, that's the thing about musicians. You're either playing in their band or they're doing something with you. And I played with Michelle and her project for years and years, but you know how you have that kismet with certain people when you sing and play. I mean, it's obvious, but Michelle and I would always, it's like brother and sister harmonies, you know, like, when we were doing that track and I was doing the harmony, and we were thinking, well, you know, get somebody, and I went, wait a minute, like Michelle would be perfect. Not only that, she's got her own little studio and just send her the files down, and because I'm like 2 hours out of Toronto to where she is, but when people hear that, you know, and even when we were doing her stuff, like at the end of shows or whatever, people are like, are you guys brothers and sisters or something? Like, no. No, but thanks. And I always loved her voice. She's got the sweetest, most original sounding, self-found voice. And when she said yes, I was like, oh, cool.
Well, it's again, going back to our conversation we were having before the song, it's another thing that's lost because I don't hear a lot of that anymore. People use harmonizers, again, computers, and it's interesting that people harmonize with themselves. Sometimes that works. But I would prefer that they double tracked it or overdubbed it rather than using a harmonizer and doing it right at the same time. It has a better sound to it. I know it's a little technical, but I thought I'd throw that in.
No, I agree, because it's like there's that, and even more so when you do have the timbre and color and quality of other voices, that melding of those tones creates that new tone. It's not just that they're singing the 1, the 3, and the 5, and somebody's singing a major 7 or something.
Right.
It's like it's all of those put together that creates that new vibration. And you're right. It's cool. Like, well, hey man, if you can sing, you should at least be able to harmonize. So why not do it, yourself that way? Not only that, in the approach, talking about the technical aspect, there's a slight absence of time and space and give inside of the way that is. So it makes it more human. It's less quantized. So it's like, did somebody just turn a pedal on? And you can tell right away it's got that weird plastic sound to it, right?
Yeah. Well, it's the difference between, Mozart and the theme music for Mario, Nintendo.
Da, 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 da.
Yeah,
Yeah, plastic.
Plastic, absolutely. That plinky plunky sound. I mean, it was funny that you brought up food as a comparative, and I've been trying to think of doing a musical comparative. Okay, music today is like Cheese Whiz compared to, the music of the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, was like, and then I had to stop there because I couldn't figure out some really gorgeous food that's all organic and that's all,
Well, this is the other part through education. And even as a young kid, before having hands-on musical experience, music as an appreciation is a big part of should be a big part of our culture and educational system. It's been removed in many ways, even hands-on application for younger kids being able to do that. And what I've learned from coming from a pharmacological family, back into Europe, great-grandparents, grandparents, parents, and my brothers and sisters and I, we all garden. We had 1,500 acres. We had dairy cattle. We had beef cattle. What happens is your appreciation level for the tactical relationship that you now have to the growing experience changes. It goes to 10,000% all of a sudden. That's where music and appreciation and food and agriculture come together for me. Because if I go to some variety store and buy a frozen pizza to throw in the oven, well, it's a box pizza thrown in the oven. You can taste it.
Right.
You go to the garden and you've grown zucchini and some tomatoes, and your partner maybe knows how to make some nice dough, and together you wonderful little pizza. I guarantee you, other than the taste being heightened, your appreciation again for that goes through the roof. When you have an uneducated public that doesn't understand that what it is, because they don't have those experiences. I was lucky, man. You were lucky. Some of the teachers that I had in grade school, or my experience growing up in a rural area, gave me that ability to share that with my friends. I saw my other friends living those lives and existences, and I thought, wow. And for me, when you talk about Joe Walsh going into the studio, I go into the supermarket now, I go, wow, so much has changed in 35 years. I can't believe how people are consuming, and they don't think about it. It's arbitrary. And that's what's dangerous, is that just like taking it for what it is. And I understand people need to eat. People are struggling, economy issues, money. But man, if you put a little time and energy into it, you can grow thousands of dollars of food in your backyard.
Well, that's true. I mean, unless you live in an apartment. But
but then in that same regard, you could be supporting local growers if they're around, right?
Right. No, your point is very valid, and I agree with you. People are getting fat and all kinds of health problems, like you mentioned, because of this food that has God knows what in it, and all kinds of processed carbs and things like that. My grandparents always had their own food, always cooked their own food, never bought stuff in a box. They went to the market, they bought fresh, and they lived to be 90 years old. I always get in trouble to say this, but I'm going to say it anyways.
Good.
I would say the main reason, or one of the main reasons, why all of this crap food came about was because of the women's movement.
The women's movement. Explain to me more.
Okay, back in the 1940s, after World War II, women decided they were going to go to work. So now, all of a sudden, they had no time to spend all day at home cooking real food. So Madison Avenue, in their success to make money, they created instant TV dinners. And in order to keep those things from rotting on the train or the truck, had to put in all kinds of preservatives. And they also had to make them cheap so that people would buy them. So they substituted real food for, red dye number 3 and whatever else they put in there. And it was because of quick. It's got to be ready to go in 10 minutes instead of taking an hour and a half like it would if you had to make it from scratch.
Right. Well, I agree with you to a certain extent. I mean, what I would say is that coming from an Eastern European family, myself, that this is primarily a Western cultural phenomenon where, for instance, in my family, my dad cooked, my grandfather cooked, my brothers and sisters and I all cooked, my mom cooked, my grandmother cooked. In some cases, it was a fight to who was going to get to use the kitchen next. Competitive cooking, whose dish was better than the others. This proud sense of accomplishment when a younger child actually gets to that point where it's like, hey, guess who cooked dinner tonight? All of that is still part of the European experience, that they eat fresh daily, that everybody contributes as a part of the eating and cooking experience, that this then develops a stronger social mechanism inside of the home as a result.
Right.
So and to tell you the truth, you want to talk about the women's movement. Hey, man, I know some European women that rule the roost. Okay, they're the ones that wear the pants in the house. And so at the same time, on a sociological level, this idea that if women can go out into the workforce, they're people, they're human beings, they should be able to do what they want to do. Men, no different. If a man wants to cook, should be able to cook. If a woman wants to go to work, she should be able to go to work. If she wants to cook and stay home and look after the kids, she shouldn't be criticized for it. If a man wants to go to work and bring home the bacon, that's fine too. But what I'm getting at more so is how that unit, the 2 parents and 1.2 children, function on a daily basis. Because that idea that you're talking about, which is so true to form, has separated that mechanism of togetherness, working, cleaning, tidying up. In my house, man, hey, look, if the girls cooked dinner, the boys cleaned up. If the boys cooked dinner, the girls cleaned up. It was always this sense of give and take, or, hey, you got to go to the garden to get potatoes. Okay, who did it last time? There's always that experience of doing it together. And it may not show itself immediately, but later, on your perception, looking back again to what those things are. For me, in my own personal experience, it's made me a stronger person as a result of that, more connected to my family. And we weren't the kind of people that were like, oh, well, my grandmother's 80, we should put her in a home. No, she lived with us till she was like 96.
Yeah.
And that's the way it is in Eastern European homes, where it's like there's 3 generations of people living in a house, where it's like that doesn't really happen. The kids are out by 18, mom and dad, and da-da-da. So the family unit, the destruction of the family unit has been going on for a long time. And that may be a chemical aspect to what it is, but I think it's even bigger than that. It's even bigger than that.
Well, I think it's more prevalent probably in America than any other country. I think the family unit has kind of destructed. And I think back, 20, 30 years ago, it became a financial necessity for the women to go to work, because one, income wasn't enough. So back when I grew up, it was very unusual for mom to work. Mom stayed home and baked cookies, and dad went to work, and dad made enough money to take care of everything. Now, unless dad's the CEO of, Morgan Stanley, probably not. If he's got an average job, it's going to take 2 incomes to live the same standard that my parents did. So
see, and on a sociological level, that idea of materialism and ego-driven based materialism, that cat that you're talking about that may have the upper echelon job, not the upper echelon job, but somewhere in the middle, probably has a $600,000 mortgage, doesn't own their car,
right,
and is in debt. This concept of perpetual debt and people being continually in debt is manifested by the idea that materialism is a necessity. You got to have the latest new car every year, right? And if your fence isn't this way, and your hair doesn't look this way, and your nails don't look this way, and you don't have this jacket, you're not up to date. And I think there's been a lot of people for many years. Even look at some of the things that Noam Chomsky gets into to talking about on a sociological level. These kinds of things are hard for people to get away from. An interesting point. When I was working as a music therapist at the Pine River Institute, one of the primary things that a younger person would need to have to go through is a quote-unquote decompression period. That meant they went to Algonquin Park. It could be an extended period of time, almost 6 months. But that meant no TV, no internet, no newspapers, no magazines. And when you remove yourself from that, in that wildlife kibbutz-esque mentality, you start to change. You're not continually being inundated. People don't realize that on a day-to-day level, when you're driving your car down a highway, between the signs, the advertisement, and the things that are going on, it's continually being bombarded at you. And psychologically, we think we're tuning it out, but at the same time, we don't realize that we're paying attention to so much of it. Then we get home from our jobs that was stressful all day, turn on the television or something, and watch the catastrophes come in and unfold on the news media. You know what I mean? And that means the fight or flight button mechanism is always on. And as a result, that on a chemical level then stirs up all the protein-based DNA inherent diseases that are in us. And so when I would see kids come back, and I go, man, before they left, they were like, I thought they were going to pull out a hatchet and come at me, to this new level of whoa, okay, so this is who this person is, and I understand where their issues are now, and I'm still trying to figure out more and more about them. But seeing that change made me realize, and I've had them myself by going out to the bush for 10 or 14 days and coming back and going shaking my head, what's going on here? This isn't right.
Hey, Ed, you know what? Our time is up. We are real long, and I got to cut this off, and then I want to talk to you after. So, sure. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It was really a great treat to have you. Loved your music. Loved listening to it.
Pleasure.
Conversation was very engaging. Best of luck with all of your endeavors.
Thank you, sir. Album. You as well. Pleasure being on the show.
And the album is called Ed Roman Red Omen. So please go get it. Download it. I'm sure it's out on every platform that there is, right?
Pretty much. And you can get it on my website as well, too. You can check it out on Spotify. It's on Google Playlists. You can check out older stuff of mine all on SoundCloud, CD Baby and Amazon, iTunes. Like you said, it's all over.
All right. Well, Ed, thanks again.
Pleasure, Douglas. Thank you so kindly.
Well, that's about all the time we've got for the show today. I want to thank my very special guest, Ed Roman. This is Douglas Coleman saying goodbye.